Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, I might not know what to expect from this team in 2023, but there's got to be something I'm excited about, right? That plus a whole lot more coming up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for June 30th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show. And, of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thanks so much. We definitely appreciate that. And we appreciate my man, Ari. He does a great job working very hard to make sure we're looking good and sounding good, and we're playing our part on YouTube. You can check out Ari on Twitter, at Ari Produces. You can always hit me up on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And, of course, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, always wide open like some old school TV antennas, 707-654-4693. As a matter of fact, coming up in segment number 3 of today's show, we got your calls and texts, including a really good call from my guy, Big Nate. It's going to start off segment number 3, a really, really good call that you don't want to miss. That's just a little bit of a tease for what's coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, I don't know what the expectations are for the Raiders. They have so many questions. We talked about it multiple times on the show. What are they going to do in 2023? Training camp will start to give us a little bit of an idea, but still the expectations are just, I don't know. I don't know where to begin with them, and I don't know really what kind of bar to set for them. But there's got to be some element of this team that I'm really excited and pumped up about, right? Yeah, of course there is. We'll talk about that in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as we always do. And I've mentioned it multiple times that training camp opens up on the 20th for rookies. That's when they report, the 25th for the veterans, and the first day of practice is on the 26th. I just wanted to reiterate that because there's a couple guys that actually may be in training camp with the Silver and Black when they open up for their first day of practice on the 26th. One guy we talked about in great length, Marcus Peters. He's a guy that there's been speculation, there's been reports, there's been rumors. Vic Taford mentioned that he felt like Marcus Peters was going to be signed before training camp opens up for the Silver and Black, and I kind of was surprised by that, thinking they'd probably wait until they see what they have during training camp. And then I talked to Vinny Bonsignore again on Thursday on my radio show, and he said he was getting the feeling that Marcus Peters was going to be signed as well. So maybe the Raiders have seen what they need to see from the corners that they have in camp right now, and they feel like they need to bring a guy like Marcus Peters in. So don't be surprised if that happens sooner rather than later before that first day of practice on the 26th. Again, that's a guy that we talked about a few times already on the show. But how about free agent safety Deron Harmon? He's a guy that played for the Raiders in 2022, a guy that I expected the Raiders to already go out and re-sign and bring him into the mix, a guy who I don't expect to need all the training camp because I'm sure he'll be ready, as I've mentioned that on the show before. Well, there was a report that came out on Thursday saying that former Raiders and Patriots star safety Deron Harmon is drawing significant interest from several teams per sources, but aims to make a decision on his best fit around the time that training camp opens up. And apparently the Raiders are a team that has interest. So I've said it multiple times. I mentioned it on the show on Thursday. I would love to see Deron Harmon take another run at it, another crack at it with the Silver and Black. I thought he did some really good things for the Raiders in 2022, and I think that his veteran presence would be great for this team that has a lot of youth on that defensive side of the ball. We'll see what happens, but cool to hear that Deron Harmon is actually getting some interest from teams out there, and it's not the fact that it's, oh, yeah, well, we kind of know who he is. No, I don't have any interest. He's getting a little bit longer in the tooth. No need for that. So maybe Dew Harmon is a guy that ends up being back with the Silver and Black after all in 2023, something to pay attention to. Now, in segment number 1 on Thursday, something I was very passionate about that I wanted to talk about was the gambling situation and the suspensions that were going to be coming down from the NFL. And I said, depending on what time you listen to the show on Thursday, there may already have been some suspensions. We might already know the names. Well, they did come down on Thursday, and there was 3 names that were rolled out. None of them were Raiders, which is fantastic. And you don't know if that's the end of the suspensions, if there could be some more coming. Who knows? But Isaiah Rodgers, we knew about him. Rashad Berry, both of the Colts, they were both free agents, and they're both actually free agents now because the Colts let them go. And then free agent Demetrius Taylor, all suspended indefinitely through at least the conclusion of the 2023 season for betting on NFL games in 2022 season. These players may petition for reinstatement at the conclusion of the 2023 season. That's a statement from the NFL. And then also Nicholas Petit-Ferrer of the Titans is suspended for the team's first 6 games of the 2023 season for betting on non-NFL sports at the club facility. So again, something that they're not supposed to do. They're not allowed to make bets at the team facility, on the road, team hotel. There's 6 sets of rules, right? There's 6 sets of rules that they really focus in on, and I think that there is, some gray areas in these rules, but others believe that these rules are pretty cut and dry and that these players just need to know better. And one of those guys is my guy Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN. He does the Daily Wager, does a really good job. And before I get to his sound bites from what he had to say on my radio show on Thursday, I did want to let you know that sometimes people are just dumb. Colts cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, and I say that with all due respect, but this is just dumb on his part. Colts cornerback Isaiah Rodgers won a $1,000 bet on his own team that he placed last season. This is per David Purdom, and I actually talked to him on Freddie and Fitzsimmons on Thursday night as well, and it was a prop bet on the over-under on rushing yards by a Colts running back, his own teammate. And what was unusual about the bets that really stood out to the people that were paying attention to this is that Isaiah Rodgers normally placed bets that were anywhere from the range of $25 to $50 range, right? 25 to 50. This one was a player prop bet on over-under on rushing yards that was for $1,000. So he went from $25 to $50. Those are the bets that he's normally placing to $1,000 bet on a teammate. You tell me that didn't draw a bunch of red flags? That's just dumb. But he did that, so of course everyone's thinking Rodgers knew something ahead of time or he wouldn't have placed that kind of a bet. So that was just as dumb as it gets. So that you just can't fix stupid, right? But some of these guys, I feel like they could be in a situation where they just don't know because of the rules that are out there. And I have these rules written down, and let me look at it. Don't bet on the NFL. No brainer. Don't gamble at your team facility while traveling for a road game or staying at a team hotel. Don't have someone bet for you. Don't share team inside information. Isaiah Rodgers, that felt like an inside team information bet. Don't enter a sports book during the NFL playing season, and don't play daily fantasy football. Those are the 6 rules. So Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN's Daily Wager joined my radio show on Thursday, and I got 2 sound bites that I want you to hear from him. The first one, I asked him, Joe, there's 6 rules that they're really focused in on, but is there enough clarity in these rules, or do they need to be, more specific on what these players can and cannot do?
There is 100% enough clarity. It's whether or not they have the attention spans to pay attention, because it's not as if the teams and the league just kind of fail to mention that you can't gamble. If you've ever been in an NFL facility, the signs are everywhere. And this isn't something that's new since legalization started. This has been going on from the beginning of the NFL. They have made it very clear to everyone at every turn, you cannot gamble on this sport. Don't even think about it. It doesn't matter what it is, a prop, a side, a total. You can't bet on it. It doesn't matter if you're betting on your own team. Don't be stupid. This is what comes with the territory. Different jobs have different regulations. I work in TV. I can't go on air and start drinking, get drunk, and embarrass myself in the company. I can lose my job. Maybe there are some jobs out there where you can have drinks. I can't. I have to accept that. They have to accept the fact that they can't bet on football games. And a lot of guys get it. But some of them, for some reason or another, just assume they can fire some bets. It'll be harmless. Maybe they'll get away with it. Maybe it won't be noticed. Bookmakers and these betting operations, they work with the league. They've always worked with the league, even pre-legalization, so that if something suspicious took place with a point spread move, they could alert the NFL, NBA, NHL, or Major League Baseball. I mean, how do you think these fixed matches in women's tennis got called out? Bookmakers see highly suspicious activity, and then they alert the association, which looks into the match in question. So if you're signing up under the name Joe Fortenbaugh, and Joe Fortenbaugh is an NFL starting tight end, and that account is making NFL wagers, the Sportsbook is going to let the league know about it. And if you're betting on property, the geo-tracking is going to get you as well, even if you're betting on the NBA or Major League Baseball. So learn the rules. Don't jeopardize your career. The signs are everywhere in the locker rooms. There's no reason this should be happening outside of just pure stupidity.
All right, there's Joe Fortenbaugh. And anyone who has never watched Daily Wager, it's a gambling show. So Joe is very, in the know when it comes to all things gambling. And you can hear how adamant about him saying, like, no, Q, they're very clear. If these guys can't, stick to the rules and not do this, then they're just dumb. But then I asked them and I posed that question, that number 5, don't enter a sports book during the NFL playing season. That's one that I talked about on the podcast on Thursday. So here's me asking that same question to Joe Fortenbaugh, who also knows the casino that I go to all the time. And here's his answer. So this one I think is legit, that is very gray area, but Joe Fortenbaugh had a really good answer. So here's the question and answer that I asked on Thursday on my radio show. There's 6 key rules that the NFL is really emphasizing when it comes to gambling policy. And number 5 is the one I have a question about. And listen to the scenario. This is don't enter a sports book during the NFL playing season. And I let everyone know that one of my favorite places to go here in town is Green Valley Ranch, right? Green Valley GVR, right around the corner from my house.
Yeah, baby. I live in Henderson. I love going to GVR. I'm there all the time. Shout out Hank's. It's my favorite restaurant in town.
There it is. There it is. Bone-in ribeyes for everybody. That's what I'm talking about. So, so you know where I go, and I park inside the parking garage, and I walk through those big double doors, and as I look over my shoulder, what do I see? I see the sports book. Now, have I entered a sports book or have I entered a casino?
Okay, that's a great question. I think in a scenario like that, you have enough cameras everywhere that you would be able to roll back the footage, take a look at what actually happened. In the scenario you're laying out, if you're walking through the garage, and I know exactly what you're talking about,
yep.
I play in all the contests that Stations offers, college football, last man standing, NFL last man standing. I park in that same garage and I come running through that door every Saturday morning to get my picks in like a complete lunatic covered in sweat because it's the last possible moment. So that's a story that's neither here nor there. But I know what you're talking about. If you would be walking in through there and you take a look and you see that the game's on, but then you continue on your way, I would imagine that would be looked at and said, all right, this isn't necessarily a violation. He parked in a parking lot. He cut through. He was close, but he ended up going to the pool or the restaurant or the check-in or something else. But if you're hanging out in the sports book, if you go in there and you start watching games, even if you're not betting, again, it's a violation. These are just things that even if they seem crazy and innocuous, that's the rule. And if you're playing in the NFL, you can't do it. It sucks, but those are the rules. If you hate it that much, leave the NFL and you can go sit in the sports book all day long.
So there you go right there. Hopefully we don't hear about any more of these suspensions for gambling. Hopefully these players realize that it's not worth it and they just don't do it. As I mentioned after segment number 1 on Thursday's show when I said players don't use FanDuel at all, I mean that. Like, there's just no reason. While you're in the NFL, maybe you shouldn't be placing bets, period, so you don't take a chance at even getting caught and having any kind of trouble or any kind of suspensions. And if some of these big-time players, could you imagine a big-time player being out for a season because they made a stupid bet that most likely they probably lost on, right? And you could win too, but is it really worth the risk when you know that the NFL is trying to crack down and make sure that none of that's going on and they're suspending folks for at least 6 games? And if they're betting on the NFL, then it's a whole stinking year. So I thought that was some good clarity and some good, confirmation, very adamant and passionate confirmation from one Joe Fortenbaugh from the Daily Wagers. That's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, I don't know what to expect from the Raiders, but there is something I like about the Raiders, and I'm excited to see what it looks like in 2023. I'll tell you all about that coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about FanDuel. And FanDuel's right now telling you need to take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and getting 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to go hit the first home run. It's all in an app that's safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. No better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel. It's America's #1 source sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to talk about something about this Raiders team in 2023 that I'm pretty fired up about. My expectations, I'm not sure what to expect. There's so many questions, right? Who's going to be under center? Obviously, is question number one. Is the defense going to gel? How are some of these guys going to come together? What's the play calling going to look like? There's so many questions that the expectations, as we've talked about here on the show, it's hard to just say, okay, this is what I expect from this team in 2023. But that doesn't mean that I can't be excited about something on this team, right? Could you be excited about the quarterback change, the coaching staff year 2, excited about the young guys on defense? Can you get excited about Max Crosby, Chandler Jones slimming down a little bit, a healthy Nate Hobbs, Josh Jacobs returning, Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers now as a true number 2 receiver? Like, there's so many different elements that you can like. There's got to be something that gets you fired up about the season around the corner. Obviously, training camp is less than a month away. That's something to get excited about. There's something, and maybe it's plain and simple as just more Raider football. Get you pumped up and excited, and that's okay as well. Again, this was supposed to be a subject that I was going to have on my radio show, and because the subject that we had that was, really near and dear to my heart and talking about sports and what it means to just people in general and just everyone in general, how it brings people together, that took over the subject. So let's go ahead and talk about what I'm excited about, what excites me about this Raiders 2023 team. And really, I'll tell you what it is and what I'm going to start paying attention to day one in training camp on the 26th when they had their first day of practice. It's the rookie class. I mean, it's that simple. I feel like I have a pretty good idea about the free agents that the Raiders have, but you can't build teams through free agency. Free agency is only a small little window, right? It's not something that's sustainable for a long time. And how you build really good teams is through the draft. And, I mean, that's the way to do it. And so I look at the Raiders. This is the first full draft that Dave Ziegler's had an opportunity to navigate through. 9 picks. And, of course, they had undrafted free agents as well, but 9 picks that they made. I'm excited to see the competition that they'll bring to the table in training camp. I'm not saying all 9 of these guys are going to make the team. Not saying all 9 of these guys are going to be stars and all of a sudden the Raiders, all their woes are going to be fixed, but I want to see what the competition looks like, what the young studs can do, what these young players can go out. Can they push the veterans? Are there going to be a couple jobs that are lost during training camp that they say, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Thought that veteran held that down. I talked about Marcus Peters being a guy that the Raiders could add before training camp. Jerron Harmon, same thing. Maybe one of these rookies or 2 of these rookies say, yeah, you don't need those guys. You have us. And boom, we understand it, and we're ready to get into the mix right away. Or maybe they're ready to get into the mix, 4 or 5 weeks into the season. Like, you remember when Trayvon Mullen was a rookie and the Raiders didn't pass over, they didn't allow him to, be a starter until they thought he was ready. And that ended up being that week of the Houston Texans game. And they traded Garyon Conley right before that game to the Texans, showing all the disrespect in the world that they could. And they went out there and they played and they lost to the Texans. And Conley actually played a pretty decent game. But still, they felt like Trayvon Mullen was ready to take over. And so at that point, they threw him in. And I know that was a different staff. But the point is, I want to see how these guys could contribute, what they can bring to the table, and realize that these are the guys in next year's draft and even the draft picks from a year ago. These are going to be the guys that are future Raiders to go along with the Max Crosbys, the Nate Hobbs, hopefully the Josh Jacobs for multiple years. Devontae Adams, you probably got a small window with Devontae. He's not going to be wide receiver number 1, a great wide receiver in the NFL, one of the best in the NFL for a long time. There's a lot of young studs coming up behind him as well, right? And he knows that. He said that before himself. So looking at the Tyree Wilson, the Michael Mayer, Byron Young, Trey Tucker, Jacorian Bennett, Aiden O'Connell, Chris Smith, Amari Burney, Nesta J. Silvera. Again, not saying that they're all going to make the squad or they're all going to be starters or all going to be studs. I've heard people say you're going to see 5 starters on defense that are rookies. It's like, man, they only drafted 6. Right? I know they have undrafted free agents as well, but literally they drafted 6 defensive players in the draft. I've seen people say 5 are going to be starters. Like, out the gate already? Do you know how hard that is to do? Tyree Wilson might not even be healthy and ready to go. Now, I'm not wishing that on him, but, I mean, reality is he's coming back from a foot injury. Mayer, I like him. I'm excited about him. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a red zone, just a monster in the red zone. I don't know what that means as far as how many catches and yards he's going to have, but I think what matters is points, right? So I think Mayer is going to help put more points on the board, which matters. Byron Young, what kind of juice does he bring to the table? Trey Tucker, what does his role look like? Right? I mean, you have Hunter Renfrow still on the roster. You have Drew Carter that you signed as a free agent that can be a speedy punt returner, kick returner guy, right? Does he push a guy like Drew Carter right off the team? Does he have a very small, limited role in 2023? And maybe he's a guy in 2024. Jacorian Bennett. If they draft Peters and they have Nate Hobbs play on the outside, does Jacorian Bennett at some point push somebody for a starting job? Does he start in 2024? You know, what does that look like? But what does the competition look like in training camp? Is a guy like Amik Robertson, who's on the squad right now, is he a guy that maybe a Jacorian Bennett pushes so they don't need him? Right? I mean, there's going to be some competition. We say that a lot about training camp when it comes around. Oh, man, there's going to be so much competition. There's so much talent. They're going to have to make some tough decisions. I think the Raiders are really going to have to make some tough decisions. I could see some competition along the offensive line with the undrafted free agents that were signed immediately after the draft, the McClendon Curtises and the Dalton Wagners. Can they push a guy? Could they push a Alex Bars? Could they push him right off the roster? You know, could Dylan Parham actually transition to center and maybe push Andre James off the roster and then another offensive lineman step up? I mean, there's so many questions. I think that there is honestly a lot of competition coming up in this training camp that is less than a month away. But these 9 draft picks that Dave Ziegler went and selected this year, I'm excited to see what they look like in camp and preseason. And then I want to see, obviously, how they develop throughout the course of the year, and that's something that I'll be paying attention a lot to because I want to know if Dave Ziegler can really have a good thumb and a good eye for talent, right? Because, look, that's the GM, and it looks like that's going to be the GM for a while unless they totally flop. So is this going to be a guy that we start talking about? I was like, hey, man, he's really good at the draft. He does a really good job in the draft. Like, I look at organizations like Seattle, I feel like they do a really good job. Baltimore, I feel like they do a really good job. Certain teams just get it. Right, and they know what they're looking for, and they go out and get their guys that fit with what they do, and they're able to do it. Right, John Lynch and the 49ers, they've been able to do that really well lately. Right, they've had a good idea. They came in together. Lynch and Shanahan, they came in together, and they built their team. They took some lumps early, if you remember. Ask for your 49er friends. They took some lumps early, and then they figured it out. They eventually went to the Super Bowl. They lost, but they went to the Super Bowl. Right? So it seems like now they figured out what works for them, what they need, what the players that they're looking for, and they go out and make the moves. Yeah, they missed too. Like, you know, Trey I almost said Trey Young, the Hooper, not Trey Young. What is his name? Man, he's played so little. Yeah, anyway, you know who I'm talking about. The quarterback that they made the move for to go up and get, and he hasn't played worth the salt, you know, because he's been injured the whole time. What in the hell is his name? It's Trey. All I could think of is Trey Young. Trey Young is a basketball player. Oh, man, I hate when I do that. Anyway, well, you know what I'm talking about. Trey Lance. Jeez. Woo. Man, oh, man, I'm glad that wasn't a pop quiz and I had to answer that in 5 seconds or I'd be a dead man. So, anyway, but you know, you get what I'm saying. They make moves and they've missed, but they've pretty much found a great formula to build their team. That's what Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels and Champ Kelly want to do. They want to consistently build their team through the draft. So how do these guys start to pan out? You won't really know their full ability till, you know, they have some games under their belt, but we'll get a good glimpse of them. We'll get a good idea of what they could possibly bring to the table in training camp preseason, and obviously who can get on the field early and start contributing for this team. So that is what I'm most pumped up about this Raiders team in 2023. Wins, great. You know, want to see the veterans, obviously, want to see the offense go out and dominate. Would love to see the defense all come together, some of the young free agents that they brought in. But again, free agency ideally is meant to build a few holes or fill a few holes here and there, and that's it. And everything else is really built through the draft, and that's how you have consistent talent in the cupboards. And that's what the really good teams do, and that's what the Raiders are attempting to do. I'm not saying it's going to work. Other staffs have attempted to do this. Right? John Gruden tried to go get all the foundational players and really build the team up and be consistent for years to come. We heard Mike Mayock say it. It sounded great, right? Just like it sounds great right now, what I'm talking about. We got to see it happen. So those are the guys that I'm focused in on. Those are the foundation pieces. Those are the guys that are going to be the building blocks for the Raiders for not only this year, but years to come. What are you excited about, Raider Nation? 707-654-4693. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. We're going to lead things off with a call from Big Nate, the Steeler fan, but a very important call you don't want to miss. It's coming up next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. I said it at the top of the show that Big Nate and Cali had a really good call, and he was responding to Joey Z, who was going through some medical situations. And, you know, we started out the show on Thursday, you know, sending some prayers, and I know Raider Nation was very active on Twitter, showing some prayers, you know, letting them know that they had her back as well, which I thought was awesome. But Big Nate and Cali, he's calling to respond to that and also sharing his story as well. Here he is, Big Nate and Cali. Remember, this is a Steeler fan.
Hey, Q. Big Nate from Los Angeles. Just calling in because I heard a message you gave out. You started the show. Well, that would be Thursday's show with a text message about a guy from Raider Nation named Joey Z. Just wanted to chime in real quick. First off, I pray all is well. I don't know exactly what's the diagnosis is of you, Joey, but I'm also going through a lot of stuff. I'm only 37 years old, and I'm suffering from CHF, congestive heart failure, kidney disease. I'm currently visually impaired. I'm blind, and I've been through 11 surgeries in my life, and I'm only 37 years old. But one thing that keeps me going, Joey, is family, friends, and sports. Chiming in to my Locked On host, Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, and also Q from Locked On Raiders. These two guys have been a blessing in my life. Basically, chiming in with them, chopping up about sports, and that's one thing that keeps me going, man. Honestly, I've even called in to talk to Q recently when I was hospitalized in June for 5 days. I think I called in 2 or 3 times from the hospital bed. I just had to put my 2 cents in on for that episode and things of that nature. But it keeps me going, man. It puts a smile on my face every morning listening to these two guys. And like I said, they were godsends, man. So I hope that episode puts a smile on your face. And like I said, I pray all is well. And also, I know Raider Nation does have your back and praying for you. And also, bro, a member of Steeler Nation also has your back and is praying for you. So, with that being said, I pray you be able to make the game, the Patriot game. And like I say, hope all is well. Q, welcome back from your Hawaii trip. I've never been to Hawaii, but I know it was a blast. Pray all is well. Talk to you soon.
Man, Nate, I said that was a special call, and it was, and that's why I started off the third segment with it, man. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate you. Appreciate your message and your testimony. And I guarantee, man, that you sharing your story and the trials and tribulations that you've gone through and are going through, I guarantee that touched somebody. If it only touched one person, then we won. We succeeded, right? So thank you so much, Nate, and please believe Raider Nation's got your back as well. You know, it's funny, sometimes we goof and we laugh and we say, oh, Nate, Steeler fan, listening to the Raiders podcast. Oh, man, that's crazy. But, hey, man, we love you, brother. You know, I mean, really, we do. And we're with you. We got your back. And thank you so much for sharing that message and that story. Like I said, man, it really does mean a lot. So thank you so much, and we do appreciate you. Let's go ahead and get into another call real quick. How about Proto in the 778? He's calling to respond to Slickback Raiders' question about Derek Carr in response to why he thinks the moving on was a really good move. Here he is, Proto in the 778.
Hey, yo, Q, it's your boy from Vancouver, 778 Proto. Just wanted to give a quick response to Slickback Raider for his statement, and also welcome back. But I wanted to say this. Honestly, I don't think it's that Raider Nation hates Derek Carr. Me personally, I just think I got tired. Every single offseason, it was the same question. Are we going to cut Derek Carr? What is Derek Carr going to do? And Derek Carr this and Derek Carr that. And that just became the only thing everyone ever talked about. And quite frankly, if Derek Carr was winning games and winning playoffs, it wouldn't matter. But if everybody wants to talk about you and you're also not winning, it just kind of becomes a problem for the team. And that's what I think, honestly. I think it just became a problem for the team. Personally, I think it became a problem for me. I've been a Raider fan since forever, and I just don't like the fact that all of a sudden we just became the Las Vegas Derek Carrs. Like, that was the only thing anyone ever cared about. So the fact that we moved up from Derek Carr to me is a positive, because at the very least, we can end that conversation and move on to talking about the team. And that is actually what's happening right now. More people are talking about the team and not just Derek Carr. And I think that for me, that's a positive. Again, I don't hate Derek Carr. If I ever see the man, I give him a good Raider handshake. I'll embrace him like a brother. I don't dislike him. I just think it's time to stop talking about him as a Raider player. So that's what I think. Thank you once again, Q. As always, Raiders.
There he goes, Proto in the 778. Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, yeah, the point you made about it becoming the Vegas Cars and not the Vegas Raiders is really something I remembered. And I remember bringing it up and talking about it on the radio a lot. I kept questioning, and I tried to say it as respectfully as possible. I didn't want to just sound like a jerk about it, but I kept saying, like, since when do we as Raider fans, get hung up over one guy? I mean, there's been guys that have been traded from the organization. There's been Raiders that have left as free agents that obviously played massive roles in the organization, and I don't feel like people got as upset and as angry as they did when Carr got sat down and ultimately moved on from and is now a New Orleans Saint. But it's a real thing, right? And so it just kind of blew my mind. And so when you say that, it's not like you're saying it and you're making it up, because you're spot on. It's something that actually happened. And like I said, it really did blow my mind. But thank you so much for that call. I definitely appreciate you. Let's go ahead and get a text in. How about a text at 707-654-4693? This one comes from Raider Wally from Ohio. He says, "Good morning, Q. Raider Wally from Ohio here. Hope your vacation was awesome. I had a text in reply to Slickback Raiders text about Derek Carr. Between two, I totally agree with him. I don't understand why so many Raider fans don't like D.C. I really think a lot of Raider Nation don't realize how good of a quarterback we had in D.C. Show me another quarterback that was able to put up the numbers he did with having no continuity year to year, new coach or OC, new system or playbook. D.C. is only the fourth quarterback in NFL history to throw for 35,000 yards in first 9 years. Beat Manning's record for completions in the first 5 seasons. There is more on top of that. DC didn't get a fair evaluation from Ziegler and McDaniels. McDaniels wouldn't open the playbook up, which made it easier for defenses as it got later in the games. How many games did we start out on fire and end up losing? And I'm hearing fans blaming DC. McDaniels didn't let him have all the tools to win. Hell, DC has 28 fourth-quarter comebacks and 33 game-winning drives. Don't take this the wrong way. I hope I'm wrong about McDaniels, but what I've seen there, too, many things he does that great or even good head coaches would never do. Have a great day, Raider Nation. That's Raider Wally from Ohio, and that's exactly what we were talking about. There's always going to be someone on the other side that feels completely opposite. And that's why I always say that Derek Carr is so polarizing. And thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. And, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's hard to argue when you just look at the pure stats when it comes to Derek Carr. And you're right about the continuity, the coaches, OC, no defense. Like, you're absolutely right. But the one stat that you didn't bring up is the win-losses. And, and again, I'm not saying that all that's him, but if we're going to play the numbers game, we have to play all the numbers. We can't just play some of them that fit our narrative. But I understand where you're coming from, right? I mean, so again, it's going to sound like I'm being combative, but I'm not. It's just part of the problem. And I think that Josh McDaniels, at least my understanding from him, the reason why the playbook wasn't opened up is because he didn't feel like Derek Carr or the rest of the offense could understand it and take it at that time. So whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I'll say this, Coach McDaniels has a lot to prove, as you mentioned. He hasn't proven that he could be a good head coach. I think it's okay to criticize him like that and I say it on the radio all the time. He's got to prove that he could be a good head coach and not just a good OC. So there's a lot of proving it that's got to be done. The Raiders gave Derek Carr an opportunity to prove that he could be that guy. They gave him a contract that, if you look at it, it clearly showed that they can get out of it with no, repercussions, basically. And they did it. They chose to exercise it after they saw what they saw in 15 games. So whether you feel it's a fair evaluation or not, the only people that matter are the guys that made the evaluation and the guys that signed him to the contract. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So there's always going to be someone that doesn't like it. And Raider Wally, I'm not trying to, like I said, be combative to you at all. I just understand that it's both sides of the fence. Some people are okay with, Carr being gone after 9 years and thank him for everything he did and respect everything he did. And others are like, yeah, he didn't get a fair shake, right? He did all this and had all those numbers, as Raider Wally pointed out. So it's a tough call, man. It really is. And that's why it's so hard to talk about Derek, because somebody will always feel some other type of way when it comes to Derek Carr. But thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And let's see. We'll get one more call in. Miller Raider in Ohio. He's calling to talk about the Raiders being in no man's land and how he feels about the thought of looking forward to next year's draft already. Here he is, Miller Raider in Idaho. And, oh, by the way, he's a first-time caller.
Hey, Q. This is Miller Raider from Idaho. First-time caller. Been listening to the podcast for a little over a year now, and you got to say I love the content that you bring, like the fact-based information you give, whether it's good or bad. And it's amazing. Just want to commend you on the good work, and I'm calling in today to kind of give a few comments on today's podcast about being in no man's land and whether or not we should lose on purpose to get a higher draft pick to better the roster. And when I hear that, I get frustrating because I just ask myself, how many L's do we need to take before we get better? I mean, the last 20 years, you could say that we've been doing that, and it's not working. I mean, we've had number 1 overall picks, top 10 picks. I mean, we've been all over that draft board, and it hasn't worked out. Now, I'm hoping that this new regime is doing their job and scouting players and signing the right players, because that's the only thing we can do. I mean, to look forward to the next draft already this season is just kind of beyond me. I think that these guys have kind of cleaned house. They've gotten the players that they feel comfortable in. I think we should just basically give them a chance and see where we go. My expectations for this team this year is about 500, give or take. And then hopefully with some luck, the ball bounces our way and we get into playoffs. But, I mean, after last season with all the hype and stuff, I'm just kind of lowering my expectations, kind of just seeing what happens. I mean, there's a saying that says, you know, don't really expect much and then overachieve from it. It's just crazy. And you know, I thank you, and I love what you do, and God bless, and go Raiders. Miller Raider out.
Miller Raider, thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. Really good call. Thanks for being a new booty here on the show. And yeah, I can't imagine trying to focus on the 2024 draft already. I mean, I can't. You know, and I know what Adam Hill said on my radio show about no man's land, and we talked about it on the podcast, and it feels like the Raiders could possibly be in that no man's land. But, man, to me, and like I was trying to express to Adam, like you almost have to find a way to be able to get yourself out, climb yourself out of no man's land without sacrificing the whole year. I mean, the Raiders have been losing forever. It feels like they've been, I don't want to say tanking because they haven't, but it almost feels like they've been tanking for 20-something years, right? And that's not what you want, obviously. So thank you so much for that call, man. Good stuff, and totally understand where you're coming from. It's hard as hell to ask a fan base, oh, don't worry, just be patient. Another year of losing, then, be right in the right spot. Don't worry. Like, how do you tell a fan base to do that? And obviously no team would ever tell a fan base to do that. I mean, hell, look at Philadelphia in the NBA, the 76ers. Remember the whole process? That process is still processing, and it still hasn't processed out the way that they wanted it to. So, you know, you could end up like the Philadelphia 76ers, who openly did exactly what everyone's talking about, is basically losing to go get that high draft pick and go and get that player that everybody wants. So thank you again for that call. I appreciate you. We'll take one more call. It's Friday. We'll finish out the week strong. Raider in the 646, and I say Raider, and I don't know the name because it kind of got muffled. There was a noise that banged in the background, but I know his name is Raider something out of the 646. He's calling to talk about the Raiders being a middle-of-the-road team, as we talked about on the pod, and we just talked about with Miller Raider in Idaho. And he's also a first-time caller. And like I said, I missed his name because of the loud sound. You'll hear it, but here he goes. Raider something from the 646.
Hey, Q, what's up, man? This is Colin Raider. I've been listening to you for a while. Just want to say, man, love what you do for Raider Nation. Want to call in real quick. It's my first time calling, but I just wanted to talk about where we're at. Listening to the podcast talking about us being a middle-of-the-road team. And unfortunately, I think your friend is right, man. I understand the whole thing. It was time for Carr to go, and I listened to the podcast for a long time where you were saying, you know, Jimmy G's not really an upgrade. I 100% agree with you. And I look at it like this. We're a long way away, unfortunately, and I want to be positive, and I hope I'm wrong, because Raiders Nation, I want us to win. But if everyone talks about McDaniel's system and the way it is and how hard it is to learn, say we do bad and get Caleb or Drake, man, and then they need a year or so to learn the system and be any good. And what is that, 2-3 years down the road from now? Devontae Adams is 2 to 3 years older. If he's still here as a Raider, we've wasted the best receiver and some of these offensive weapons that we had. The system is so difficult to learn, but we expect a rookie is going to automatically come in next year and be able to do that. It just doesn't look good. And like just I said, I don't really see a great plan, unfortunately. Once again, I want to be wrong on this one. Raider Nation out. Just win, baby. I hope we win. I hope I'm wrong. Let's go. Raiders.
Great call. Great call. Thanks for being a first-time caller as well, a new booty on the show. And the points you bring up are some big concerns as well. You know, you don't want to waste the talent that the Raiders currently have in attempts to bring in young talent and at some point replace them. Like, you don't want to waste the time of Max Crosby. You don't waste the time of Devontae Adams. You don't want to waste Josh Jacobs. You don't want to waste those young studs on not winning football, and then all of a sudden get some talent and think that you could take it to the next level, and then all of a sudden Max Crosby is, looking at a third contract, or Devontae Adams is not Devontae Adams. He's not the number one wide receiver in the league anymore, right? You want to take advantage while you have that talent, but you've got to take advantage while you have that talent. You got to figure out how to do it, right? That's the biggest problem. But thank you again for the call. Thanks for all the calls. Thanks for the text. Thanks for all the feedback that we get throughout the course of the week. We definitely appreciate you, Raider Nation, and thanks for dealing with me while I'm having brain fart situations when I can't decide if it's Michael Mayer, Matthew Mayer, Meyer Mayer. I mean, man, I was struggling with Michael Mayer's name. I almost messed it up again, and I'll have to tell him that story next time I get a chance to see him when we're at the Raiders facility. But until Monday, Raider Nation, have a fantastic weekend, right? Try to relax a little bit, enjoy your time with your family, get a little R&R. I don't have to do any radio this weekend. I'm excited about that. I've been doing a lot throughout the course of the week, a lot of filling in on ESPN nationally, so I don't have to do any of this weekend. I'm excited about that. I'm going to try to get a little R&R myself, and, not that I'm bogged down after coming back from vacation, but just saying, just got to take advantage of the weekends when we can, and we'll be back here strong on Monday's show. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.